I'm Todd Schrupp. Welcome to TVG's Legends. Our guest tonight is Jerry Bailey, a rider who battled alcoholism to become one of the best riders in thoroughbred racing history. Think about this. He won an astonishing 5 Breeders' Cup Classics, as well as purse money of $300 million. And to the casual sports fan, he is the man who helped guide Cigar to 16 consecutive victories. But there's a lot more to him than that. As a matter of fact, Pat Day called him one of the best riders at coming up with a strategy and implementing it in a race. Tonight, one of the best riders in thoroughbred racing history, Gary Stevens, sits down with Jerry Bailey to talk about his career.
Jerry, how did you get involved in horse racing?
Well, Gary, the funny thing was I didn't want to be a jockey when I was little, when I was young. I'm still little. I wanted to be a football player. I wanted to be an athlete, really, is what I wanted to be, and primarily a football player, and that didn't work out too well. But my father told me if I wanted something bad enough, and I had the passion and was willing to work hard enough to get it, I would achieve it. So I kept trying this sport and that sport, and it never fit for me until I found horse racing, and it was because my dad loved horse racing. He was a dentist by trade, but he loved to go to the races. He eventually bought a couple of horses, and that's how I started hanging around the barns.
Talk about Sunland Park, 1974, wasn't it, when you started out?
It was. Sunland Park is very, very low-grade racetrack at the time. The purses were $1,200. Again, nobody starts up there. Nobody starts in the Hall of Fame. They usually start at the bottom, and that's where I started. But it was a good learning ground. I mean, there was a lot of riders there that had the ability. They were maybe too heavy, too old to compete in the big times, but they had a lot of ability, and it was really a good training ground for me.
Did you have any dreams of being in the Hall of Fame, winning a Kentucky Derby at any point in time?
Never even thought about the Kentucky Derby. You know, I saw these guys come out of the jocks room, bright-colored silks and white pants, and I saw them leave with a girl on their arm and get in a big car. And I said, this is for me. I mean, this looks great to me.
How'd you get from New Mexico to New York?
My father was very influential, and he told me, and I had some success early on, and he told me, Jerry, if you think you're going to be good and you like doing it, go to the bigger cities with the bigger racing. And I started out trying to do that. I mean, I didn't go right to New York. I was a little intimidated by the fact of the bigness of the city. But I crisscrossed the country. I went to Arkansas, and then I went to Chicago and Florida, and eventually made my way to New York. But I had to take it a step at a time. I didn't just go right there.
So what type of rider were you when you started out the first couple of years?
Hoop-de-doo. I mean, I started on quarter horses just like you did. And that's what I learned. I learned get them out of the gate quick, get them close to the pace, and that was my style. And I really had to adjust it as I got further east. And horses came from off the pace more. The guys I was riding for wanted them to come off the pace for, and they were more effective coming off the pace. So I had to go through a big transition, actually.
With the success that you had comes money, comes good times, everything else. It's been well documented, the type of lifestyle that you led early on. What effect did the drinking have on your riding?
A profound effect. It had an effect on everybody I was around. I mean, I was the last one to know it. I really was. I was what I called mired in mediocrity. You know, everybody knew I had talent, but I just wasn't putting it all together. I mean, every year I'd go to Saratoga, I was the guy that was most likely going to upset Angel Cordero. Never happened. I mean, he beat me every time. And that was a big reason. The drinking was a big reason for it. And until I conquered that and faced my problems and got beyond it, that's where I was going to stay, right in the middle.
Do you still think about it? Do you still battle those problems you had in those days?
I don't particularly. But early on, it was a funny thing because a lot of people said throughout my career, you don't have any friends in the jocks room. And that's the story, Jerry, you don't have any friends in the jocks room. And I don't think that's exactly right, but I can understand where they would get that impression because I had to not go out with those guys anymore. I used to party with them all the time, but when I stopped drinking, I could not go out to the same places they did for fear I would drink. So I would go out with Susie and have dinner and go home. It was dinner and go home. And it wasn't out with my friends from the jocks room and stuff like that. So I did get the reputation of a loner, aloof, not wanting to go out with everybody else. Was it because I was too good for them? No, it was for my own survival. But I can see where people got that impression.
I think we were a lot alike in the jocks room. I didn't talk to anybody in the room. If I did, it was very brief, it was quick. If I'd come into town to ride in New York, but I had a job to do, and that's what I saw in you.
That's exactly the way I was. And a lot of people said, you don't look like you have any fun out there. And that wasn't the point. The point was I was trying to remember everything I had studied for the last 20 or 30 minutes and maybe the night before, and I was trying to retain it in my mind. So when I walked out to the paddock, I wasn't telling jokes and playing around with all the guys going out there and wasn't smiling at this fan or that friend. You know, I was trying to remember exactly what I had studied, and that's the reason I was the way I was.
What does Jerry Bailey consider his biggest strength? Was it a combination of everything, or was there one thing that...
Well, I was pretty good at a lot of stuff, but I spent a lot of time riding with Cordero. You know, and Angel was very aggressive, very intimidating, and I knew I couldn't outmuscle him. You know, so I had to try and outthink him. That's the only way I could beat Angel, because if I tried to outride him physically, I couldn't do it.
Did Angel Cordero make you a better rider?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I think you'll agree. Guys like you, Angel, Lafitte, always when I rode against better riders, my level went up. And so I think without a doubt, Angel made me a better rider.
When Legends continues.
I asked Cigar to do something he couldn't do. I mean, I was of the mindset after 16 in a row that he could do anything. And no horse can do anything.
You climbed so many mountains, had so many achievements up to that point, fought off a lot of demons. Then a horse comes along, Cigar. Was he a major turning point in your career? I mean, took you to a different level?
He really was. See, I got sober in '89, and I won my first Breeders' Cup in '91. I was climbing the ladder with big races, and I was becoming a guy trainers could trust. And I won a Derby in '93. So I wasn't a household name, but I was on the short list of jockeys that trainers would call for a big race. But Cigar put me at a different level, I think. He's the one that at least brought me, in my mind, to mainstream America. You know, the guys that hadn't heard of me before, they would call, and when they had a horse shipping into town, they would call my agent and say, I want Jerry, I know he rode Cigar and this and that. So, you know, a horse like that is once in 10 lifetimes, not once in a lifetime.
Greatest win on Cigar?
I hate to tell you this, but it was against you and Soul of the Matter in the Dubai World Cup.
America 1 and 2, Pentime back in third, they got a furlong to go, it's a duel to the line, there's Soul of the Matter the outside of Cigar, and Cigar is digging deep, he's never had to fight harder, he's coming back, it's going to be Cigar, it's going to take him up the line, Cigar by 3 parts of it, 14 out of 14 for Cigar, a world champion.
As much as I appreciate the Derby, and you can relate to this because it is so special, the Derby, the fact that we were over there representing America, you know, and let me explain to the public, I mean, we didn't know what was going to go on. We didn't know, brand new track, brand new place, and I felt that I had not only my owner and trainer I was representing, but my country. And I think the fact that he proved he was the best horse in the world was very special to me. But it was a great race, and I'm going to tell you something, I thought you had me beat at the middle of the stretch. I mean, you came roaring up there on Soul of the Matter and got up eyeball to eyeball with Cigar, and I wasn't sure I had enough to hold you off.
I got to tell you that I got new respect for Cigar on that night. When I passed you, I thought I had it won too. And as we come down the last 16th of a mile, I see out the corner of my eye, you're coming back, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
You know, everybody said through the course of the previous year that, yeah, what will he do when a horse looks him in the eye? Because he will have that day when he's not at his best, and a horse is going to look him in the eye, and will he be good enough? And he didn't have the perfect trip to Dubai. He hurt his foot. He didn't have enough prep race that they wanted to get into him. And I think that answered the questions because you were on a very, very good horse. And he didn't just creep up to me. You rolled up to me. And I was very proud. And I think he answered the question to you and to me that what he was really made of deep down.
When you tied the all-time record, 16 wins at Arlington Park, with Cigar. What kind of moment was that?
That was great. My wife Susie is from Illinois, and I rode in Chicago for several seasons, and I've always had a real fond place in my heart for Midwestern fans. They're great. They're very enthusiastic. They even cheer losers. And so to go there and have 35,000 people, which is a rarity nowadays, as you know, if it's not the Derby or the Breeders' Cup, it's rare to get a crowd like that. So to go there and be able to tie the record and have all those people so enthusiastic just stand up and cheer, you know, it sent chills down my spine.
You go to Del Mar, Pacific Classic, you're going to break Citation's all-time win record of 17 consecutive wins. You criticized yourself after the ride. Darren won the race.
Right.
What about it? What'd you do wrong?
Well, I asked Cigar to do something he couldn't do. I mean, I was of the mindset after 16 in a row that he could do anything. And no horse can do anything. I mean, they can't do it all. We had come off the Hollywood Gold Cup in which Siphon beat me on a horse for Alan Paulson as well, a horse named Jerry, who was a very, very good horse. And I saw Siphon get to the lead and keep on going, so I was convinced that I could not let Siphon get away from me. And Bill Mott and I had a discussion about this. And so Siphon went to the lead, and I was next to him, a few lengths back of him, and Corey Nakatani came up next to me, I think on a horse called Dramatic Gold. And it was apparent that he was going to try and pin me in. Well, that's fair game. You know yourself, when you're the heavy favorite, you have a target on your back. And I just thought that if I let him pin me in, Siphon would slow the pace up and would be walking the dog down the backside, going too slow. And when I was able to get out and get free, Siphon would have been gone. Had too easy of a lead, too much of a rest. So I asked Cigar to go a little faster early on, not thinking that Corey was going to keep pressuring me down the backside. And he did. And I probably should have changed my mind down the backside, but I elected to keep Cigar out, clear, putting the pressure on Siphon, and ask him to do something that was probably impossible and ended up impossible. So, yeah, I mean, there's two of us out there, and I'm the one calling the shots, so I'll take the heat.
How hard were you on yourself? If you got beat on the fourth one, were you hard on yourself when you got home, or were you able to leave it at the racetrack and go on to the next day?
I couldn't leave it anywhere. I mean, it's a character flaw I have, and thank God for my wife. She has taught me to appreciate the moment, because I always had a problem. I would never enjoy the victories as much as I beat myself up for the losses. If you've heard of Type A personalities, I'm a Triple A.
Talk about Cigar giving you a deeper appreciation for the racehorse, for the thoroughbred racehorse.
Yeah, I told you, when I started out, I didn't really want to be a jockey. I didn't love horses, even though my father and my family had them all around. I wasn't the kind of guy that would go out and just ride through the woods. As a matter of fact, the only time I was on a horse other than the racetrack was on my honeymoon, and my wife begged me to go riding on the beach on a horse. So they were a means to an end for me. They were a vehicle for me to make a living, but I liked them, but I didn't really love them until Cigar came along. And not only was he a great horse, Gary, but he was very charismatic. And he had that wide eye. And anytime you see a horse with a wide eye, every time they look at you or look in your direction, it's like they're looking right at you. And he was a cool horse. He knew when the cameras were going to come around. Justin was 3 at the time that he won the Breeders' Cup Classic in '95.
And Jerry Bailey calls on Cigar for everything he has. The Carrier's a weakening second on the inside unaccounted for. And here he is, the unconquerable, invincible, unbeatable Cigar!
And right after the race, we went back to the barn, and Justin, a 3-year-old, could pet him on the nose, and he was as nice as could be. So he was as close to a human being as I was ever around for a horse, and he knew how he wanted to run better than I did.
Justin, he's of school age. He obviously knew who his dad was, what his dad was doing. Was a huge fan of yours?
He didn't know he didn't appreciate who I was.
Just Dad?
God bless him until I got a bobblehead. As soon as I brought the bobblehead home, he says, wow, I guess you really are somebody, because he had all these Yankee bobbleheads. He's a huge Yankee fan.
Is the Derby different from any other race that you've ridden here in the United States or abroad?
It's take no prisoners. It's 20 horses, and your mother won't give you a chance. I mean, you're as big in that race as the horse you're on. I mean, nobody gives you a chance, and you've got to make your own luck, and you have to be really lucky. You not only have to have the best horse, but you have to have the best horse on that day and have a lot of racing luck.
All right, I know my first Kentucky Derby, I was going down the escalator, and I had the great Bill Shoemaker behind me going down. He says, kid, when you go out there, he said, you're going to shed a tear when they start playing my old Kentucky home. He said, don't worry about it. He says, I have every year that I've ridden the Derby.
I don't know how many Derbies I rode, to be honest with you, but even the last one I rode, I welled up when I got out there. Yeah,
1993 Sea Hero. Did everything go perfect?
Everything went perfect. It really did. He broke and settled in, and every time I had to make a decision and get through a flight of horses, some guy, it's like being on the freeway. A guy would move to the right, and man, there would be a lane there, so I'd take it. And then a guy would inexplicably move to the left or right again, and I would take it. And as I turned for home, there was only one guy in front of me, and it was Gary Stevens. I mean, you were on personal hope, and the rail was wide open. And I remember what Mac Miller told me. He said, now listen, don't take a chance on getting stuck down in there. I want you to circle the field if you can. And there was a big wide open hole, and I made it, and I was just the best horse that day, I think. But everything did go right.
And down the stretch they come. Sea Hero on the inside up to
take the lead. From between horses, that's Personolo. On the far outside, Prairie Bayou is flying, and Wild Gale is right there. But with 70 yards to go, it's Sea Hero, and Matt Miller gets his Kentucky Derby.
3 years later, Grindstone, you're coming down to a head-and-head finish with Cavalier, Chris McCarron aboard. Did you know you'd won?
No.
Or no idea?
No. You know, when we're close to each other out there in a race and we hit the wire, we have a pretty good idea of who won. But when you're a distance
you guys were
apart,
spread apart.
We were 20 feet apart, so it's hard to tell then, as you know. But again, a situation where he was way back in the pack, and every time I had to make a decision or follow a horse, I was able to follow the right one. And I only won by, a quarter of an inch. So if I made any wrong move that day, I wasn't going to win.
It's Cavalier on the inside and Grindstone on the outside. McCarron and Bailey. Here's the finish. Too tight to call.
I would have settled for a tie. But I was so exhausted. I don't think I've ever been that tired in my life. I had to take my legs out of my stirrups, and it took me a minute just to get my air. And it took like 4 for them to go back from the commercial and get the photo finish up. But I would have taken a dead heat.
Do you know you've either got it or you don't have it? You know you're going to be 1, 2, 3 or not. What's the feeling like in the post-parade when you're headed to the gate like that?
Well, both of them that I won, I don't think I was ever on an overwhelming favorite. Empire Maker was the favorite, but not overwhelming. But both the ones I won, I was long shot, fairly long shot, but I thought I had a good chance. Sea Hero, I knew I was going to win at the 8th pole. And by the time I got to the wire, I was already starting to cry. And I cried pulling up. And I was so upset that I told my wife to stay home. She had our 6-week-old son, and I said, I've got no chance. Stay home. It's too crazy over there. So I really felt bad. The second one I won, I didn't know if I'd won. So I really had no time to react after the race. But when they hung my number up, I cried again because I was glad she came. And as you know, you don't ever know if you're going to get back there again, much less with a chance to win. But if you've won 1 or 2 or 3, as you have, you can't wait to win another one. It's the most undescribable feeling.
Did you want a second one worse than you wanted that first one after you experienced it?
Definitely. I wanted to relive it. And I wanted the third one even worse than that, Gary, because I wanted my son to be able to enjoy that. And the more years that went by, the frustration built up, and I said, you know what, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do it. And I wasn't. But still, I was so blessed to have been able to win 2.
Shifting gears back again to 1999 Breeders' Cup, Arkong. Again, I was
It seems like a
second best, but tell me about that.
Complete shock. Didn't even have a mount for the race.
You and me both.
Yeah, I was scuffling for a mount a week out, and this horse came available because Mike Smith jumped on Devil Is Due for Alan Jerkins and left this mount open. I knew who Andre Fab was, but I didn't realize the magnitude of the kind of trainer that he was. I walked into paddock and he's 99-1, and I hadn't won a race all day, and I was crying the blues. And I thought, you know what? I got in the post parade and I said, geez, I hope I just don't trail the field by 100 yards. That'd be really embarrassing. So I didn't have any instructions. They gave them to me, but they were in French. I couldn't understand them. So I just tucked the horse in. I said, you know what? I'll go to the fence. I'll take my chances. What's the difference?
Arkang, a huge upset looming here as Arkang comes flying on the outside. Here is Arkang to win it. He's 99-1.
He just took me by you like it was nothing.
I had no clue who passed me.
That's, and then when I came back and I said, I wonder what this horse paid, because he's probably got to be 50-1. He was 99-1. And when they threw the number up, $269, I was completely shocked.
Black Tie Affair.
My first Breeders' Cup win, early in sobriety, got that mount. Really, I had never ridden him before either. And a lot of things had to happen for me to win that race. But I think that's the case with a lot of big races. A lot of things have to go your way.
And Black Tie Affair, Brimley trying to hold on to the lead. On the outside, Twilight Agenda. It'll be those two. Black Tie Affair on the inside, Twilight Agenda. Black Tie Affair, and a front-running masterpiece.
It was great for me, though, to finally be. In '89, I had one mount in the Breeders' Cup race, and that was Herat. And he was 50-1, and I finally was able to, what I thought, be among the elite jocks.
What about Concern?
During the course of the race, I was trapped inside on the 3/8 pole, and Mike Smith was right outside me. And I looked out, and he looked over, he said, "Do you need out?" I said, "Do I ever?" So he moved out just a little bit and gave me some daylight, and Concern started his run. And he made a furious run through the stretch, and I still had a lot of links to make up. but I was able to get up in the final strides to beat Tabasco Cat and Pat Day.
Concern will try to do it from last to first. Concern from out of the clouds.
And beating Pat Day at Churchill Downs is not easy, as you well know.
I hear all the time how all the good riders are gone. I disagree.
Yeah.
Do you?
I
are there
disagree.
stars out there?
Oh, I disagree wholeheartedly, just like you. These are great riders out there. I'd like to go down the list, but I'm afraid I'll forget somebody.
Exactly.
But all these guys are very talented. The only reason they're not household names is the same reason we weren't when we first came up. It's because Cordero and Pincay and Shoemaker were taking all the headlines. But as soon as we're out of the picture, these guys will be the stars, if they're not already. I mean, most of them are already, but they'll become household names. And in 5 or 10 years, you know, they will be where we were, and when they leave, they'll say, all the good riders are gone, you know? It's the same thing. I mean, they'll become household names shortly.
How do you want to be remembered?
I've given that some thought, Gary, and I didn't think of this the last couple of years I've ridden. I've thought about it just recently, and I always thought I wanted to be remembered as a fair guy, and I do, I suppose. But I also want to be remembered as somebody that got a lot from the game that gave back. And I think that is what I want to do most now in the next 5, 10, 15 years, however long I'm around racing, is to be able to give something back that's productive, that'll make the sport a little bit better.
What was the one food that was forbidden, that you had to have, yeah, but you couldn't have?
Well, I'll generalize it first. Fried foods. I mean, if I looked at a piece of fried food, it put a pound on me. But fried chicken. I grew up in the South, and it was meat and potatoes and fried chicken, and that's the one thing. The second day I didn't ride, I went to Kentucky Fried Chicken and got a piece of fried chicken.
If you could ride any horse in any era, except for Cigar, which horse would it be? And you better not say one that I rode that I screwed up on.
No, you know, I mean, the obvious would be Secretariat, because he was so loved by America. But I'm going to say Citation.
Really?
Because as much as I respected Eddie Arcaro, I got to spend some time with him before he died. As a matter of fact, Mike Smith and I used to have dinner with him every year when we went to Gulfstream in January. Full of great stories. He told me that this horse could do anything. He said he was the greatest horse he ever rode. This is what he told me. So if he was that great to him, I'd love to have tried him.
If there was a race that you could do over again in your career, is there one?
A mulligan?
A mulligan.
Be the Pacific Classic. It really would be. And I think not so much for me, but for Cigar. Because I don't know if he was better than Citation. Somebody asked me that one time. We were in Chicago for that race, and they said, if tomorrow they lined up in the gate, who would win between Citation and Cigar? I said, Cigar, he's fitter.
Now, I've got a book called The Perfect Ride. I got a little plug there.
There you go.
But I never had the perfect ride. What I considered the perfect ride, my life wasn't the perfect ride. Did you ever have what you considered the perfect ride?
I guess Grindstone would be as close for me as I could come, because the margin of victory, the race, it was the Derby, and if I did anything wrong in the race, I wasn't going to win. But I got a story for you that I think the hardest thing to do is perform under the immense pressure. And the Derby certainly fits the bill. But there was a weekend at Saratoga, and I rode a couple of stake races for Bobby Franklin. It was on a Saturday. And I was trying to get them out on Medaglia d'Oro for the Travers. And he had run second in the Belmont. And he said, you know what, Jerry? He said, Kent DeSormo, who was riding him at the time, rides a couple of races for me, stake races in California. You ride 2 stake races for me here in Saratoga. And whoever does better is going to get them out on Medaglia d'Oro. So I won both races for him, you by a nose.
Oh, a daring move there by Jerry Bailey.
And Tate's Creek by a nose. One was a test, and it might have been the greatest race I ever rode at Saratoga. And Tate's Creek I won by a nose, and I don't think I was the best horse. But the fact that it was the Travers, hanging, you know, riding the Travers favorite, hanging in the balance, that might have been my best weekend ever.
One of the great pleasures of my job is getting to meet my heroes up close. And it was towards the end of his career that I got to meet Jerry Bailey and truly get to know him. And one thing people maybe don't realize is just how important family is to Jerry Bailey. Without the support of his wife and his son, it is safe to say, and Jerry Bailey would admit, he would not have been nearly as successful as he turned out to be. And he also appreciated the horse towards the end of his career. For Jerry Bailey, it truly came full circle. I'm Todd Schrupp. Thank you for watching Legends.